What is up? So in about the last 10 years, I have lost over $640,000. I'm 32 years old and I'm going to break down the biggest financial mistakes that I made during my 20s that led to a loss of over $640,000. Brutal. So if you're 20 years old or in your 20s, sit back, grab some popcorn, watch so you don't make the same mistakes that I did and end up losing a whole lot of money. All right, just a few short years ago in 2015, this would have made me 25 years old, right around there. Bitcoin was a whopping $327 per Bitcoin. It is now over 35,000. And if you would have said just a few months ago, it was a heck of a lot more than that. So if I, in my 20s, would have invested $5,000 into Bitcoin, it would be worth well over $500,000 now. Also, right when I was in my 20s, 2008, average house price for America was $175,000. If you look at it now, it is over $300,000. So I lost over $140,000 worth of appreciation in a house if I would have just bought a house. Heck, if I would have even have just put money into the S&P 500, my money would have quadrupled. But I didn't do any of that stuff. I was crazy frugal, but I didn't invest. So yeah, I lost over $640,000 just because I was unwilling to invest. Now at this point you might be saying, well, this video is clickbait. I wanted to see how this dude lost $640K while doing some crazy Wall Street bet crap. Now if you wanted to see how I just lost a bunch of money just so you could come and rub it in my face, kind of jacked up. But if you want to learn how to be better with your money and make some smart choices, stick around. I'm going to go through it. All right, before we jump in, do me a favor and smash that like button. Now, back to my 20s, my biggest financial regret is not investing earlier. So I could have told you like the things that everybody else would want to say, like do this in your 20s and you'll save a lot of money, right? Like budget, share a room during college, don't spend money on useless crap, all that stuff. All of that stuff is 100% true and I agree with it, but it's also really boring. It's boring to talk about. So jump in and start investing early. That is the biggest thing that I wish I would have done in my 20s. And I say all of that because I was that dude, right? I was the nerd who was like crazy budget, way frugal. I just didn't want to spend money. Like when everybody else was out partying, or in my case was just eating out, because I live in Utah and honestly I didn't hang around with much of a party crowd. They were eating out, I wasn't. I was saving my money, and that's what I did. I took all of that money and I threw it into a savings account, and it sat in that savings account and it made nothing, absolutely nothing for me. All right, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. Help me hit 100,000 subscribers so that I can change the world one person at a time. So if you're in your 20s, make some very calculated risk decisions and decide, hey, what is worth it, right? You're 20 years old. You have a whole lot of life ahead of you, and taking $5,000 and investing it is not going to kill you, right? Like even if you lost all $5,000, you're 20. You have years to make all of that money back up, even if you fell completely on your face, which is not likely. Don't do what I did and stash your money in a savings account, because you are literally losing money when you put your money into a savings account, because the amount of interest that you are being paid is nowhere near the amount of inflation that is going on, especially right now. Don't pay rent to other people in your 20s. Find a property and then charge people rent to stay there, especially in college. All right, so let's break it down. This is what I would do if I could do my 20s over again. Now, obviously, I could look back, perfect hindsight, and say, yeah, Bitcoin would be amazing to invest in. But even if I just did this first one, I would have came out way better. The biggest thing that I would do if I were in college again or in my 20s is I would house hack. Essentially, house hacking is where you buy a house, you live in it, but you also have other people living in it and they're paying you rent, and essentially you get to live there mortgage free because the rent you are collecting is completely covering your costs. Now, I lived with a kid who was doing this, so I was the one who was paying rent to him. I wish I would have taken his example and said, all right, I'm going to do that for myself. I'm going to buy a house. I'm going to charge rent, because the college town that I went to college in, actually right now in 2021, they won't let you enroll in school unless you can prove that you have housing, because the housing market, there's a shortage there right now. So if I was sitting on an asset right now, a house, I would 100% have occupancy and it would just be cash flowing like crazy. And like I said before, the average home price went from $175,000 to over $300,000. So I'd have well over $100,000 in appreciation, and I would have an asset that is cash flowing and making me rental income. All right, after house hacking, the number one thing that I would do is invest. And you can invest in cryptocurrency, you can invest in the stock market. I would just not be afraid to throw some money in there, and even throw some money in to something that is speculative, right? Like back when I was in my 20s, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, that was a whole new thing. And if I would have just put $500 into it, heck, that would be worth a lot of money. And that's just $500. Like anybody can afford to lose $500 once in their 20s. They're going to do that by eating out anyway. So you might as well take that money and invest. And if you say, hey, there's no money that I have to invest. Well, if you were house hacking and everybody else was paying your mortgage for you, the amount of money that you save on not having to pay somebody else rent because you are the one collecting rent, just take that money and go invest, and you'll be pumped with the results 20 years from now. And the thing that I wish I would have done in my 20s was to take a little more risk. I was very much risk adverse. I took all that money, put it into a savings account, and it did nothing for me. So start a business, find rental properties that you can invest in the stock market. All of those things are great ways to build yourself a future that you're going to be happy with. Plus, I'm a CPA. I used to work as a financial statement auditor, so I would go in and audit these companies. You want to know who makes the most money in all of those companies? It's the person who took the risk, right? It's the person who started a business and took that risk. Because they took that risk, that payout gets so much bigger. Take a risk, start a business, jump into something, and you're going to be happy that you did. So if you are in your 20s and you're wondering what to do with your money, don't be like me. Don't stash it in a savings account where it's going to make 0.01% in interest when inflation is 2 to 3%, if not higher. Take that money that you have right now and invest for your future.